Ooh, man, what a beautiful group of faces in the Zoom window tonight for this event. Man, hello, everybody. Welcome to City Lights Live, the virtual event series that follows in the footsteps of our in-store calendar during the pandemic. We continue here at City Lights to celebrate the works of authors we know and love with readings, discussions, and forums into the spring season and beyond going on in the Zoom world. I know y'all remember when we used to do the events upstairs in the poetry room, but that'll happen eventually, I promise you. But for now, we're all in the Zoom world with each other. It's not so bad. It's not so bad, right? Tonight's event, we are so excited. It's being presented by City Lights Books in conjunction with Wave Books and the one and only Los Angeles Review of Books. And of course, tonight we're celebrating the launch, the birth of the new collection of poetry by Hoa Nguyen. Yes, look at this beautiful book right here. I hope you all haven't got a copy yet. You should buy one at the bookstore. We're gonna post the links to buy the book throughout the reading. 1,000 times you lose your treasure, man. Yeah, so before we get started on the reading, let me just read a quick couple of bios for the participants tonight. As I mentioned, this beautiful book is published by Wave Books. And for those of you that don't know, Wave Books is an independent poetry press founded in 2005 and based in Seattle, Washington. It is dedicated to publishing exceptional contemporary poetry, poetry in translation, and writings by poets in finely crafted editions. We're delighted to be working together with them to bring you this event. And tonight, like I said, we're celebrating Hoa Nguyen's book. She is the award-winning author of several books of poetry, including As Long as Trees Last, Red Juice, and Violet Energy Ingots, which received a 2017 Griffin Prize nomination. Ms. Nguyen has served as guest editor for the Best Canadian Poetry in English 2018, as well as the judge for the 2020 Griffin Prize for Poetry, and she has performed and lectured at numerous institutions, including Princeton University, Bard College, Poets House, and the Banff Centra's Writers Studio. Recipient of a 2019 Pushcart Prize and a 2020 Neustadt International Prize for Literature nomination, she has received numerous honors for her works. Her writing has garnered attention from such outlets as the PBS News Hour, Granta, the Walrus, New York Times, and Poetry, among many others. Born in the Mekong Delta and raised and educated in the United States, Ms. Nguyen makes her home now in Canada. And joining her tonight is one of City Lights' very own, the one and only Garrett Caples. He is the author of the Garrett Caples Reader, 1999, Complications, Quintessence of the Mirror, Symbolist Poetry in English, Retrievals, and one of my favorites, Power Ballads. Garrett is the poetry editor here at City Lights Books, where he curates the Spotlight Poetry series. Garrett served as contributing writer to the San Francisco Bay Guardian and has co-edited the collected poems of Philip Lamantia, Particulars of Place by Richard O'Moore, and Incidents of Travel and Poetry, new and selected poems by Frank Lima. Garrett makes his home right here in San Francisco. That's who we have tonight, mi gente. I'm so excited. And we're going to be posting the links to buy the books in the chat. So please take a moment. Like I said earlier, if you haven't purchased the book, please do that. It really helps out the bookstore. You know, every little bit helps these days. And it's a great way to support not only the authors, but also City Lights. So also, we're going to be having a Q&A at the end of the evening. And if you have any questions, please post your questions and comments in the chat function, and we'll be getting to them at the end of the night. Do us all a favor, and if you have a question, put a big capital Q at the beginning. That way Garrett will know it's a question and not just a comment. All right, enough of me talking. I'd like you all to please, please, please give a warm welcome now to Hoa Nguyen and Garrett Caples.
Thank you. Oh, it's so great to see everyone here. And thank you so much, City Lights, for hosting. Thank you, Garrett, for being here to be my interlocutor later in the Q&A portion.
Pleasure.
There keeps being reminders to purchase the book. I just wanted to hold up my copy. I think it's a really beautiful design. I want to thank Wave Books for the care that they give to all of their authors. Well, I guess at this point I should read from the book. Some things you should know before I begin. This book is poetry that's directed towards hauntings and diasporic experiences. There's factual events of history, a biography of verse, in verse of sorts, of my mother, who performed motorcycle feats inside of the Wall of Death as part of an all-woman Vietnamese motorcycle troupe. And ghosts and folk tales are also inside the space of the poems, with alongside recuperated family stories and investigations into myth and folktale that connect with an outside of timeness that poetry can occupy to reshape perspectives of reality, or to echo something that Jack Spicer once said, to be a poet as a time mechanic, not as an embalmer. So this first poem actually is the poem that opens the book. In it, there's actually, well, like the poems across the collection, there's a relationship to an orientation that remains musical. And so in this first poem, there's a reference to Doris Day. And there's also a phrase from the French, mise en scène, from theater or film, the arrangement of players on a stage. Also warning, I might have just not said that correctly, the French. I'll have opportunities to also not say Vietnamese later correctly, but you know. This first poem, Diaspora, meaning to scatter, to disperse. The title is drawn from that, and it's Seeds and Crumbs. Seeds and crumbs. Yes, a famous mise en scène. When I was just a little girl, Angle looks too much like Angel and vice versa. What lies ahead? Rainbows. Rainbow, who cares? Scatter the song, clavichord it. The future's not ours to see tenderly. Language points from colloquial Vietnamese. Word order for toi with chi. Toi often means only. He only studies. I can only speak Vietnamese a little. That's it, I will not talk anymore. Expressing ability. To do. To go. I can speak Vietnamese. I am able to speak Vietnamese. I am unable to do it. I am unable to go. Autonomous song. Refusing the motherland mother role, Delta girl, plotting a runaway plot, no waiting in shadows life for us. Her love of colonial electric lights, motorbikes, cursed roses, Christmas, the handsome singing of Que sera, sera, barren thorns to plunge, bouncing light spills on the butterfly lovers of Chinese legend. A frenzy of magenta flowers to devour. This poem, like a few of the poems in the sequence, uses lyric narrative to tell a story. This tells the story of my mother. Her Vietnamese name is Diep. How Diep met a fate. The flying motorist artist. At 12, Diep didn't have a half-cent entrance fee to see the circus performance. When she was 12, 3 motorcycle performers traveled from Thailand to Granta. I thought they were from the Philippines. No, Thailand. A motorcycle act that came to her province in the lower Mekong Delta, joining a country fair for the new year, 1954. Everywhere we came to see displays of snakes, contortionists, fortune tellers, to exchange caged birds. She that disobeyed the done with farm chores, washing clothes, seeing to chickens, but never the kitchen. She made things burn or break, they said, spilled rice in the dirt, bad luck, they said, and banned her. Recall that one seer and her mad possession, spirits in the belly suddenly enlarged, round and hard. When she saw the palm reader, they made tell of a sailboat. Come see the flying motorist artist, riding shadows on the wall of death, riding shadows on the wall of death. Watch them defy death on the wall of death. Danger perpendicular, their reaching hands. Two men, one lone woman riding her name loud, loud and loud motorbike flying the wooden wall roars. Netting, language ghost. You left a thread and a serious leather pouch, green lined, several hauntings, yellow amber gems to line it, left in the washroom. Toxic mirror spit, to whom do I speak? As crossed and looped, a net to the wind, to meet, not meeting, part. Purple covers me in lips, hand like a branch hand, tree bound, chased into trees. If the mind says button on the cuff, if the mind doesn't mind this reaching into your pocket and pulling out the lining, cut it out completely. And for the languageless girl chewing ice, faced turned blue, then purple, later crooked bangs of straw. I was the no-named garbage can, new teeth bit and lost lid. I get things wrong like this, new shoots to shoot through. This not enoughness learns me to be tough, bitten web of thumb we call confidence, lost most tones, and a young woman named Five who cried, nowhere, nowhere, say happy birthday, cut out eye holes to see. Napalm notes, developed in secret at Harvard, produced by Dow Chemical, an efficient incendiary formula perfected on Valentine's Day, 1942. A thickened gasoline can be dropped from planes, napalm bombs, also flamethrowers. 8 million tons of bombs in Vietnam, burns at 1,500 to 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, 1/5 as hot as the surface of the sun. Very sticky, stable, also relatively cheap. Learning the Dan Bao, the monochord of Vietnam, typically used for lamenting songs, traditionally sung by blind players. Single string with resonator, empty coconut shell, manipulated by a stick, plucked entirely in harmonics, also called gourd zither. Pluck it with some kind of pick. The notes are clear and bell-like, fairy-like, a winged string. Flexing the string, the pitch rises and falls, the notes trill. It sounds like the Vietnamese voice, they say, the pitch bending the way the voice holds sway, bends towards the Vietnamese voice, old as war, old as epic, a poor person's instrument. With an electric pickup and amp, you can make it sing Welcome to the Hotel California. This next little poem describes my mother's naming. Her Vietnamese name was Diep. When she left Vietnam in 1968, she became Linda, went by Linda the rest of her life, Linda Lievsky. But this poem is about how she actually had a first newborn name and then was renamed, and why. Diep before completion. Her first name, deemed too delicate for a failing baby. She was a baby, failing, arrived blue, feet first. Newly named Diep after the strapping Chinese butcher, renamed, she recovers. She says later, it's an ugly sounding name and thus not popular. I say it wrongly, fake my way. Do we believe in the compassionate protector of children? The past tense of sing is not singed. Tryouts for the Flying Motorist Artist Team, 1958. She tried sliding, pedaled torn pants, tryouts, a test of strength in the barrel, ride a bicycle. Are you sure a bicycle? A bicycle. Push and pedal, climb high banked sides, to try again and fall, to try again and fall, running blood. They said, okay, stop, enough, you're in. She said, I was the darkest one and the prettiest. To save performance shoes, they trained barefoot. She took a taste of earth, held hands on the wall of death. Crow pheasant, which is a native bird to Southeast Asia, the crow pheasant. You can wave off the gnat or join it in the next life, live 2 hours plus 3 days or 800 years like an 800-year-old banyan tree, beat the drums of spring for the new me, near me new moon. I kick the wicker dog, kick it hard to explain the ancient joke, how to be vast and slow compassion, the strange girl you named high up in the pond sky. But you didn't know how to spell reckon very well. You misspelled reckon and hooked me into a graffiti of surrender. Grow old bones to eat pain, fuck off renewal candle and burn the metaphor. Despite claims of no birds in Vietnam because of our constant eating aggression, who wants to hear about your North Asian, North American experience anyway if I write flowery and incomplete? We bird you to the sky and suffering release there. We cry city mountains. I came to tame with a song bowl, a song swap to dynamite the arthritic as an expansion trick. A true jade vibration travels as it sounds, sending a vibration up the face, pyramid shaped. She was born in a halo. Delta mouth begins the sentence. Coop call of pheasant crow. Exercise 14 from colloquial Vietnamese. Translate into Vietnamese. Are you happy, miss? Why are you so sad? What have you come here for? Are you English or American? Are you a tourist or a businessman? Are you a diplomat or a tourist? What did you do during the war? Were you an American military officer during the war in Vietnam? Why do you ask such a question? Oxbow Lake. I might forget the long, slow buildup and cornball delivery of Happy Birthday, the remix, sung years old answering machine makeup dust and compacts I threw out, the whole makeup tote bag, half used blush, pencils, and what else? A curse inside Nautilus. The hard final years were hard years, going blind, no going outside or hardly, and then to doctors, bebop to bebop, boom radio of the sketchy pastoral on romancy bolster covered in American toile. And in her handwriting, the notebook full of figures, Jonathan, $200, etc. And that one that said, my treasures, Orpheus butterfly, ebony jewel wing, how much cloud face rainbow rage busting out saying silly girl. My favorite lake being the orphaned one, made when the meandering became too strong. I forgot to sniff kiss the children, now they've grown. Mexico. Opening a fruit stand after her time in the circus. More exactly, could you say a juice stand? Refreshments by the water, Vinlong province, to arrive by boat or foot for a fresh drink to drink by the river, made and served to by her and her friend, also formerly of the circus. Together they opened a little stand by the water as a business, 1964. In the beginning, really just setting up, sorting out what kinds of juice, plains and mixes, papaya, dragon fruit, some ginger in there, things I don't know the names for, coconut, you name it. A handsome captain came by, tall, strong, cheekboned face, Min was his name, asked the name of this place. What was she to name it? She hadn't thought of one yet, she admitted. Min had just returned from military training abroad, had returned from Mexico where he had been sent to train. His brother, also a captain, trained in Mexico too, and he knew how to steer that one complicated military boat in Saigon. Mexico, he suggested. You should call it Mexico. She named her stand Mexico. And Min came by often, would send his soldiers there to buy drinks from her Mexico. Mexico became the most popular juice spot on the river. But sometimes his soldiers were boisterous and caused trouble. Other merchants were jealous of her success. Min, too, wanted to control her, insisted later that she move away from her Mexico to Saigon to be near him. And next was that, how old was she? Early 20s after her sweet Hoa died. She became pregnant by Min, who was married and yet wanted her with him. And when she gave birth to a son who arrived finely shaped and very long, he would grow tall, she thought. She gave the son to Min's wife, and then she was free and didn't see him again. This one's a sonnet. That's called durian sonnet, after the pungent fruit native to Southeast Asia. Actually, durian only really makes a cameo in this. Durian sonnet. I lost this sonnet once, I may lose it again. I wore the design described as concealment and surprise, the split sides and hugged features. You had to lift your arms out for the poster photograph. You had to leave your arms out to show your circus daring, to say you chose this, to say you are flying, fucking flying on the small French motorbike, hair also flying, and a glamour shot smile. I ask Diep to tell me who they are, the women pictured in black and white, colorful stripes, 5 in the all-woman motorcycle troupe. Durian translates as private sorrow. She says, I think she's dead. I don't know what happened to her. She killed herself. I don't know what happened to her. Sacred ficus sonnet. Cinched belt tugged tight around the heart, 5 or 6 aerial roots dangling, a strangler fig. Do homeless ancestors live inside the tree? Child of noise, hold the loosened ends. You may miss the moon or fall in love with it. Embrace ashes. I too am far removed, a thirst that wanders, thirsting. And I could never ask the name of the boy who died, a baby boy who died, but what could you do? And maybe words hang in sinew, in care, writer of dead words or living words and life's hammer. Encase the host tree and erase it. I don't know the folk songs on farms far from here. The dead buried and gone to dig the grave. Who dug the graves, darling? The sea widens for you tonight and deepens. And this will be the last poem I'll read from the book. Sings the wishing well, the ghost well cared for. In the story, the men get to live. The wife, faithful, dies. Her death is pious. Strangle stars bangle. Gather floating flowers. Underworld yourself. A beautiful dreamer in the mosquito myth with visions of owning a grand house. She grows ill in the fields, dies, is arrayed in a field of flowers, saved by blood magic she later betrays, doomed to live as nuisance, begging. Don't go again, I call, newly flooded fields of rice. Farm girl sits on the flood wall, sings the wishing well. We sing her story beyond time, wield feathers and clouds of her, a melted floating love gem, our tears mix with tears. I have no sacred rights for you, saving the sacred grove you grew. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Wow. I want to just give 2 reminders to the audience before we launch into our Q&A. Is number 1, if you have a question, please put it in the chat and put a big Q at the front of it so I will find it when I go through the chat. And number 2, just another reminder, if you're thinking about buying this book, please buy it today. We have links to purchase the book in the chat, and it really helps City Lights be able to keep doing these events. And it helps out. It's hard for a poet right now, to have a new book. So it will help Hoa to be able to sell some books. So that's my song and dance. But let's get down to business here, Hoa. I want to, if you don't mind, beginning in a more general sense, because I know you've been working on this book for a long time. Because I remember hearing you read early parts of it years ago, but you couldn't have anticipated that the time that it comes out is a very fraught time to be Asian American in the United States due to all the violence that's been perpetrated against Asian Americans of all countries, partly as a response to COVID. So I wanted to ask you, what is it like to have been working on this for so long and to release it at this moment in the culture?
Well, I appreciate you you bringing it into this context, this book, because it is definitely something that informs the book. I mean, the issue that you're talking about has many layers and dimensions. There's anti-Asian racism, class, misogyny, sexism, the history of Western colonialism too, right?
Yeah.
March 16th, the day of the killings in Atlanta, was also the anniversary of the My Lai massacre. And labeling the My Lai massacre a war crime or the murders in Atlanta a hate crime individualizes the problem when it's a systemic and cultural one. It's related to the long history of US wars and occupation in Asia, and the dominant tendency in English-speaking countries and Western countries to discount the death and suffering of Asians. It's a matter of policy. It's seen as in the ways in which history is documented and shared, how story is circulated. And the fetishization and sexual violence against Asian women has always been a part of these wars. And these wars have always had a particular impact on Asian women, both abroad and in North America. And the violence extends to the dehumanizing lack of context or representation. If represented at all, non-European cultures are represented in one-dimensional ways, as removed from contemporary society, and the people by extension are one-dimensional and in service to dominant narratives or disregarded. Like many Gen Xers, I grew up watching episodes and reruns of MASH, the highest rated TV show in American history, about doctors during the Korean War, set in Korea, but it featured few Koreans, right? The Korean people remained in the background with little part to play. There was little shown of Korean culture or history. So like women like my mother have not been afforded stories in Western culture. She could play the part of a war victim that suffers and dies namelessly and interchangeably, or in service to others in their stories, and that's it. It pointed to a basic difficulty and challenge, or a lack of narrative plenitude, to borrow novelist Viet Nguyen's term, all of which is to say the motivation for writing the story or writing these poems in English and complexly is to counter the stories, or the lack of the stories out there for women like my mother.
Yes, and I mean, how would you I was interested in the parallel you drew between, a war crime and a hate crime, and what do you see as the relationship between, the state violence on a massive level of a stronger military nation invading a smaller military nation, and as the attacks that are going on today, that are being described as hate crimes?
Yeah, well, I my point around that is that to individualize it as a problem with these people.
Yeah.
Oh, these bad apples in the military. Oh, this disturbed person. And it has nothing to do with anything else. It's just an individual problem. That's part of the problem, right? That
Yeah.
story is part of the problem. It's a multi-dimensioned and layered systemic issue. And so, and how that expresses itself in popular culture, in literature, is you will have things like, the play Miss Saigon, where the parts played, it's set in Vietnam, and it's Vietnamese women, but the role is a prostitute.
Yeah.
Who kills herself and then gives her child away to the white people. So just to say, the dehumanization and the lack of context or representation was a big motivator. So it's interesting to be birthing this book in this moment. It makes me curious how it would be received in other contexts. If this were part of the larger conversation, maybe it would just be talked about as like a mother-daughter story, which it also is. But this moment for me gives me an opportunity to talk about these other motivations and these other aims.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can I just ask for those, and I don't pretend to know, is the same thing going on in Canada that's been going on in the US in terms of this wave of violence?
Yeah, I mean, there's the statistics are the same here in terms of the reported crimes against Asian people, elders mostly, and more than half are women.
Okay.
And the aim for the book is to counter also monoliths of identity that are assigned to people of Asian descent. Even like the term Asian American is this unwieldy monolithic term that tends to flatten groups of people. And along with it, and there's a mention of this inside of a poem where I refer to like the model minority construct, because that's this construct that, I like to think of it as sort of an aspirational smoke and mirrors strategy of white supremacy that uses it inside of its racial hierarchies as a wedge argument to offer up Asian success as a way to avoid responsibility or to address historical and structural racism and the damage it continues to inflict on Black and Indigenous people in Canada and US.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's not to start on such a grim note, but I want to maybe I'll skip around a little bit. That I want to let's talk about your mother then for a bit. Being the sort of genesis of this, and I hadn't realized she had passed away. I'm sorry to hear that she had passed away in 2019. And I know, as I said, you've been working on this for a long time. So my question is first, like, how much of this did she get to look at? And how did she feel about being the subject of a a book of experimental narrative poetry?
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you said, I've been working on it for a while. I had ambitions towards telling, reshaping narrative that could include my mother's story, and telling it through poetry, which has its own particular relationships to language and sonic environments, which I was also interested in. And so it definitely had this trajectory where I started with a dozen poems that I made around 2013 and then set aside, wrote another book of poems that was Violet Energy Ingots, and then came back to work on the poems that would become 1,000 Times You Lose Your Treasure, working in earnest under deadlines right into her last months. And she knew I was working on them, and finished the manuscript and turned it in about 9 months after she passed. She passed in June of 2019. Her health decline was prolonged and difficult and under-resourced and managed at home, which meant that whenever my work schedule would allow, I would travel and stay with her to visit and assist in her care. And it also meant that I could ask her more questions about her life, which actually, really made it possible to write into the book more. By the time of her last illness, and she was in her mid-70s, but it was also the first time that she was inclined to talk about her life in Vietnam, her life pre-1968. She was a woman without formal education, and poetry wasn't something she read, and she didn't read mine. Most of the poems that I wrote, she said that it didn't make sense. She said that to me, plainly. I don't know what you're saying. But the ones that I shared with her, that I wrote for what would become the book, for what would become 1,000 Times You Lose Your Treasure, that the ones that featured aspects of her life, when I shared them with her, she understood these and she was really moved by them. And she once remarked that I remembered more of her life than she did, which was a really precious comment to me.
Which is in the book somewhere, right? Or it's in the afterword? I forget.
It's in an afterword that I wrote about the book for Black Warrior Review.
Yeah, people should check that out online if you can. The Black Warrior Review was out of Alabama. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. there's a really great piece that Hoa wrote, as you know, sort of afterword to the book. So her death then really has a major effect on the genesis of the composition. Then,
Well, her life did.
yeah.
And I mean, the fact that of her passing, you know, certainly it does provide different perspectives, you know, ones that you can't anticipate. Interestingly, it also had the effect of new artifacts coming to light. Her husband, my father Edward, had produced a scrapbook that I don't remember seeing ever, and that my sister Brenda also never recalled seeing previously. And you know, so these kinds of things that sort of synchronistically came up after her passing, I think happens sometimes, you know, in families, like the things in the closet, like literally coming out. And so the images in the book, as we should probably, you know, mention, there are a number of archival images in the book, including these photos that I didn't actually ever see until I was, you know, given them about 6 months after she passed.
Okay. So they weren't sort of family artifacts or anything of that nature
Well,
when you were
she
growing up.
remembered them. In
Yeah.
fact, you know, as I mentioned, she was not one to talk about that time in her life, but the last few years of her life, she would. And that's partly a function of memory. You know, your long-term memories become the place where you dwell more as the short-term memory recedes, and also as her life became sort of more narrow in terms of what she could sort of do outside of her house. But she had asked me, she said, do you remember that one photo where I'm on the wall of death and I'm turning around? And I said, no. I thought for sure she was just misremembering, but it's this photo where she's on the wall and doing sort of a side saddle arrangement on it while moving. And anyway, so yeah, I grew up with just a few of those photos. I grew up with 4 different photos of that time.
And when did you even learn about this stuff? Like when did you learn about it, and when did you have the thought like, oh, holy shit, I need to actually do some writing about this?
Well, I've always known about this part of her life, that I always knew that she grew up poor on a farm, that she was an orphan of sorts, that she left her family farm to find her fortune at 15, that she joined a circus at 16, that she trained for and became famous as part of this troupe of motorcycle stunt artists. And she did this for 4 years of her young life. And if I asked specifically about it, she would generally shut down and answer, that was a long time ago. But I also understood that meant that she had many lives. You know, she was born in 1941, which is the year of the silver snake. It's a sign of great power and transformation. And you know, she shed her skin many times, and so she lived many lives. So I think what she also meant by that was a long time ago is that, you know, I've done a lot of things since then.
Yeah. So yeah, she didn't take the past as defining in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She pretty much lived her life in a way that was uncontainable.
Okay. Well, let me shift gears a hair here, and then I'm going to look at some of these questions in the comments. But I wanted to go back to what was the second topic I had shot at you about the you have a poem in there called "From On New Music," and there are 3 lines describing Vietnamese music as a cosmic yearning for X that is tragically inaccessible. And that struck me as very related to the sort of form of this book. And I wanted to talk about the idea behind the book in terms of telling a story that is, it's not a book-length poem. It's all one, it's all one work, but it's not a book-length poem. And it's not even a serial poem in the sense that it's not, like, 1,000 treasures, 1,000 times one, 1,000 times two, that it's a whole book of individual poems, but then maintaining a whole narrative. So I wanted to know about what is it like to try and do that?
Yeah, I mean, my writing has always had an orientation towards music, and I thought of the poems, as individual poems, but then assembled into a collection the way songs on an album can be assembled with attention to how they sound as a collection of songs and how they assemble meaning together. I was thinking too when I was composing the work that I was thinking of through what it means to document the irretrievable, or what's related from memory, from tellings and retellings, what gets told and doesn't get told, and how fragments can be caught in song. And there's missing information and needs for investigation, which is why I was looking into that essay about new music in Vietnam. Needs for investigation, encounters with historical event, and where this recovered personal archive and language itself forms part of that investigation. But my looking into the history of Vietnamese music was a playful place, a place of curiosity. I was specifically interested in the music that my mother would have heard in her young adulthood in Vinh Lang, which included that Doris Day song, or the sound of the monochord, the dam bao, which produces that sound that's a little bit like a slide guitar. Like the instrument can sound like a singing voice, so that when it's played, and much like in Delta blues, it's a sound and an instrument distinct to the southern Mekong Delta region. It's influenced by the Cham people. And the dam bao produces music with notes that blur and bend in similar progressions as Mississippi Delta blues. And it's a kind of, it's a duende felt sound, very dramatic. And it helps produce sonic environments that I'm interested in. I've always been interested in polyphony and how writing can serve as a new system of sound and meaning to resuscitate narrative, or to contest narrative, or to language time differently, to arrive at a place of new tellings.
Okay, well, this is good because this touches on two of the questions that have come up in the chat. Because one question, which I don't have in front of me, but somebody was asking why Que Sera Sera, and so that was one of the touchstones song wise for your mom, or
there's a personal story of someone who she knew that sang that to her meaningfully. My experience of the song, which is from the Hitchcock film, The Man Who Knew Too Much, but Doris Day sings it in this song. It was the debut of that song, and she sings it in the movie in this very dramatic scene where she's singing it, but it's like it has a double meaning inside of the scene. So for me, it was operating. And then if you listen to the lyric itself, it's about fortune and fate, and so much of the book has those themes of fortune and fate and luck and synchronicity, and sort of it becomes a kind of soundtrack, along with other songs.
Okay.
And I don't even like the song, nor do I like Hotel California, but that's in my book too.
Yeah. Okay, well, keeping it on the music theme then, and this, you kind of hinted at this when you were talking about, but we have a question from a Jeff Hansen here, who is asking, do you think arrangement of words on a page, do you think of it as a score for oral performance when you're given a reading like this?
Oh yeah, I often think of the visual field of language on a page as both ways in which the reader can help assemble the meaning. It gives white space and visual interest. It can also load meaning visually, right, by its arrangement. And then, yeah, there's a way in which I also can use it as a kind of scoring that feels musical to me, but it's an interplay of meaning and sound together within the visual field.
Okay. Okay, and I have a quick request from Stephanie Baker. Can you give us the Spicer quote again?
Oh, yes.
And maybe tell us where it's from and why you.
Oh gosh. Well, I don't have my citations with me,
Oh,
but
that's okay.
it's a pretty famous one. Well, there are two that I don't know that they're from the same essay, but they're so linked that I always have them sort of coupled that together, which is that the poet that the poet is a time mechanic, not an embalmer. And then he also said, words, that poems are words as led across time, not preserved against it, which is definitely part of my aims with the poems, and not to make it a monument to itself.
Okay. Okay. And let's see, I think we're getting close to the end, but there's maybe a couple of more questions. Charlie Whiskin was asking if you could talk a little more about the tower card from the tarot in its relation to the wall of death as a motif in this book.
Oh goodness gracious, it's kind of a long story. I mean, it's a little bit of a long story, but the tower motif is both an emblem of the circus structure, which is a wooden cylinder topped by a canopy, a big top, and people go up to the top platform and look down to view the performers who are circling the inside of it till they're perpendicular. And they called it the wall of death, and they also called it the barrel, but from a distance it can look a little bit like a tower. And I think Charlie understands that this is also a theme inside the book as a reference, but it's also an encounter that I had that kind of set off a set of synchronicities and became more meaningful. I address it in a couple of interviews, including a forthcoming interview with Andrea Blancas Beltran that'll be coming out later this month. And I think I'll probably talk about it in my Toronto launch, which is going to take place with Knife Fork Book on my mother's 80th birthday, what would have been my mother's 80th birthday, April 21st. So maybe Charlie, I can see you in our Toronto reading to answer more fully about the tower card, because it's a good story.
Okay. And I have from Jessica Smith, what are some of the Vietnam fairy tales and myths reference so I can go read them?
Well, there's a couple collections in English. In fact, I need to purchase a copy that Thich Nhat Hanh has. I don't know where my copy to that went. A copy that I have worked with was a used book that was printed in 1964. It's a beautiful little stitched edition from Peter Piper Press. I was just looking at it today. Anyway, it's sometimes harder to find, translated well, and I don't know that translation's great, but I'm able to understand, the gist of the different myths, and sometimes it's not very satisfying because sometimes the myths are less interesting, like they have some sort of like coded cautionary tales in there, or sometimes they're in service to patriarchy, or there might be the fun sort, which is sort of like, why is the water buffalo look the way it looks? Why is it kind of ugly and wallow in the mud and have to pull a plow? And then the colorful story about the water buffalo's fate is there. But one of the things I was interested in, like there's a mosquito myth about why the mosquitoes that want to take your blood are female. And it's all about, this woman who dared to be vain and wished to be rich, And then there's like this kind of event that happens with some supernatural things. But anyway, but then in the end, she, you know, she like isn't honorable, and then she's punished by having to be a mosquito. Anyway, so I'm purposely also try to like reposition and rewrite some of the myths intentionally to unwrap them in some significant way, or some newly patterned way that can help reshape perspectives or understandings.
Okay.
I'm interested in folktales also in the ways that they connect to that place of outside of timeness that poetry occupies. I see a question from Michelle who asks if there will be a Vietnamese translation of this book. Not that I know of, but that's a great question.
Never say never. It'll happen. I think Dale has shot in that that quote, the Spicer quote, is maybe from After Lorca.
That makes sense.
Whoever, I forgot who was asking, but
can I show you this photo?
Oh, please, please.
Yeah, so I wanted to also, speaking of purchasing copies of 1,000 Times You Lose a Treasure, you also get with it this image from my family archive of my mother with her motorcycle troupe. Here you can see the 3 riders of Viet Hung, which is the name of her motorcycle troupe, going down a road doing a trick. And there's a poem, and it's a real postcard, right? You could send it. And there's a poem on the back, and I thought I could read the poem. It's just little.
Please.
It's called We Sing Too. We sing to wing a string. We sing to wing again.
Well, thank you. That was really, really wonderful, wonderful reading. And yeah, please show them the hardback. Wave Books does really lovely hardbacks of books that everybody, you know, if you really like this book, get the hardback. They're beautiful. They're beautiful. They're sewn, they're indestructible, and they're just lovely.
And this one, the color was drawn from a photo of my mother, you know, just looking out at the ocean from like 1982, but also the yellow is an homage to her name, which meant Diep means yellow butterfly.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it back over to our host, Joshua.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Josiah, sorry.
Either way, I'll answer to either one when it comes for you, Garrett. Well, please give a beautiful Zoom jazz hand, clap, scream, yell for these 2 amazing poets for the birth of this beautiful book. God, what an amazing reading. Thank you so much, Hoa. Seriously. And honestly, this turnout, y'all give yourselves a hand for showing up like this, because hey, who says people don't go to poetry readings, right? Look at all 75 of you beautiful people. And I know I was complaining about not having real readings in the bookstore, but honestly, there's no way we would have been able to fit 70 people in the tiny poetry room. So this is a beautiful thing. Let me just say one more time that tonight's event was made possible by the City Lights Foundation, continuing the legacy of the late, great Lawrence Ferlinghetti, whose office I am broadcasting from right now. So sending you some Lawrence vibes out there to the Zoom Mundo. And I don't want this to end, but I guess it has to. So people, one more time, give it up for Hoa Nguyen and Garrett. Beautiful conversation. I hope to see y'all in real time, real soon. Remember what it says on our walls. Printer's ink is the greatest explosive, mi gente. Blessings. Have a good night. See you soon.